It's like asking when everyone's using AI for making music, do you fear that one day we'll not being able to sell like a single guitar or will the advent of drum machine completely eradicate drums, which is kind of ridiculous because people still want to play music. They still want to enjoy, the process of making music. And I think that's where the value of our software lies in. It's not designed to, just replace a singer, or it's not completely being used to replace someone. We tend to think ourselves as a music instrument.
Kanru Hua from Dreamtonics have created a piece of software that can have AI sing in your DAW. You can basically write music with voices. And can we think of this as an instrument? Sure, that makes sense. What's really refreshing about this interview is he comes with an engineer mindset. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Sound Connections podcast. Today we have a different type of episode. We have all the way from the opposite side of the world where I am. Kanru, welcome.
Hello.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Tokyo. So, there's a station called Akihabara, where
I don't know.
Animation and the games, where our company is located in the center at the heart of Akihabara.
Amazing. And you have a really interesting company. Dreamtonics is a company that works with AI, but in a kind of a different way that most people used to. What we're going to talk about today is using AI as a part of your creative process. You guys have created a few different things, but one of the really interesting things is an AI singer, where you can actually use that as a part of the creative process of making music, MIDI, adding lyrics, and having the AI sing. And I can imagine there's a lot of use cases for that, and it also places itself quite timely in the middle of traditional production tools and all the way to the right of Suno Audio. So I think there's a really interesting space that you guys are doing right now. But before we start, Kanru, who are you and what do you do?
I'm really kind of engineer type of founder. I started looking into this whole thing called vocal synthesis 14 years ago. Well, I was still, in middle school. It started as a hobby project and just snowballed larger and larger and found a company.
Okay, amazing. So did you have any ground in music, or was it just the engineering side?
I wish I had this. That's one thing I kept thinking about, You started diving into technical side, and later on you realize you don't know enough, music theory and all those things. You can't even play instrument, and you go back to learn it.
Yeah, okay, so that you went on a journey going back to learn it after you sort of okay, there's some interesting things here.
But I guess I'm too late to become a master pianist or anything,
But I think that really speaks to a really interesting point. The listeners of the podcast who would have listened to a lot of episodes would probably know me quite well by now. But I do have a strong background in music. I have a master's in music. But I am more of a director type, like executive type. And what I struggled a lot with by early days of my career is there's a lot of things I couldn't do because I just wasn't a good enough musician. And that really speaks to sort of this next generation of creators, in my opinion, where the skill set of the traditional musicality is probably going to be a bit less than what it was before. Not even a bit, probably a lot less than what it was before. And creativity and expression changes its form and shape a lot. And this is what Dreamtonics also does, in my opinion. So can you tell me a bit about, you said you started 14 years ago, but how did you found the company?
So 14 years ago, there was, probably the history is longer than that. There was this software called Vocaloid. It's also from Japan. It's from Yamaha. It's a software to type in the lyrics, lay down the notes and piano roll interface, and it sings in kind of semi-robotic way. But it's targeting to totally different audios. I was probably actually into that. It's just so has that amusing quality to use. But I was thinking if I could make my own version of it and make it more natural.
And how did that go about? Did you just say, okay, this is this product, and I want to make a better version of it?
Yeah, I didn't thought too much. There weren't all buzz about AI and things back then. It was really simple. Just make a software and make it sing.
Okay. I think you're making it more simple than it actually is. But go me through the process in detail. Like, did you have the light bulb moment, or did you just started programming your freedom? Did you have a full-time job and did this on the side? What was the context?
I was just out of grade school, like 12, 13-ish, doing programming as a hobby, making Flash games. So, like a hobbyist game programmer. And back then there weren't all this AI stuff. So if you're trying to synthesize any vocal, you have to do the samples. You have to sample all the words a human can pronounce. Like you basically say ah, e, ooh, and then you concatenate them. You cut the recording into little chunks and join them together to make up for the words that weren't there.
And why did you do that?
It's fun. I mean, I didn't thought anything about how it could be useful to musicians or anything, but it's just really fun doing that. You can record sounds and manipulate them and join them together, do some pitch shifting, and turn it into a complete different thing.
So now you guys are a company, and before our talk, I was just going through YouTube Shorts, and there's a lot of people who covered like Dreamtonics and your products. And it was really interesting to see the reactions. Like people were pretty mind blown about a tool, and I can imagine you would tell me better, but I can imagine there's a lot of creatives out there that are songwriters to some degree or producers that has great ideas but have a hard time putting it out into life. What's the reaction you've had to your approach so far?
I think my approach is really empirical, I'll say. Try to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And it's not like we have this amazing AI technology we're going to apply to here to make it sound supernatural, but more like we want to make something that sounds natural, could be useful. And later I realize it could actually be useful. And let's see what are our best choices in picking the right technology to make that happen. And it got more serious, around 2017 when I was in college. I went to the University of Illinois, but still, snowballing my hobbies project. And I started experimenting with different ways to model the voice using a huge neural network. And at some point, it worked really well. So I decided to start a company.
And just deciding to start a company is not something you just do. Like, what's your background there? Like, do you have entrepreneurs in your family? Why was that a natural step for you?
No, I don't. I mean, the push factor there, is like, I just spent so much time into making this work. At one point, I realized I couldn't graduate. And
sorry, go on.
Yeah, and there's the pull factor. It's like, if I get this work, it might actually have some commercial value. Back then was nowhere near as close to the quality we get nowadays, but it's on the verge because I do have some, I don't know music, I do have some musician friends, and I see they're struggling with working with really outdated technology. Basically all what you're seeing like 5 years ago, right? People, like all the plugins, the samplers, like the technology used to model all the sound, not just vocals, but guitar, like piano. This date back to 20, 30 years ago, decades old technology. I see there's a chance we can actually make something decent, something more updated work.
So where does your motivation lie? Does it lie in the curiosity about the product's potential? Does it lie in the impact? Like, what's your driving force on continuing pursuing this?
I'm just super intrigued by the engineering complexity. Really, it's just the engineering complexity of this work. It's like rocket engineering, because in order to make a good sounding vocal synthesizer, you have to know a little bit in other things. You need to know like the basics is signal processing, like how you manipulate the signals and what the consequences are mathematically. And then you need to know a bit of like machine learning and the statistics about how you control the voices and how your voice compared to the human voice. And then you need to know a bit more on the psychology side, we call it psychoacoustics, how people perceive sound, and also vocal production. You have to know a bit about the, all the organs and what happens inside your body and how it controls the sound, how it, filter the sound. It has really bakes everything.
It's so interesting, and we'll go much more into the sort of the details of that. But I do want to understand. So in 2017, you said, okay, this might have some commercial value, and I'm probably not going to pass college because I used too much time on this.
Right.
And you said you wanted to start a company. But there's many ways you can build a company. You can bootstrap it. You can build it yourself. You can get teammates. You can get financing, whatever. What was your journey in sort of scaling this to a commercial viable product?
By that point, I actually already have a sort of working product. So I learned this many years later, actually, but I didn't fall into looking for investor or anything. I look at what other people are doing. What they call, there's an amazing thing called a startup. Like you just start a company like a startup, right? So I called myself a startup, and then I realized years later that I'm not actually a startup because there's no one funding it. I was just selling things.
Yeah. So did this grow organically, or did you have investors come on board at one point?
The beginning of it was pretty much all organic.
And then what?
You put so much work into it. There's already something working, so you're not worrying, being out of resource. I mean, there's nothing to lose. It's just one-man company, right? You just have to find a way to sell it. But that's actually the hardest thing.
Yeah, that is incredibly hard. So how did you do it?
So you look at the market back then, there is not a single practically usable vocal synthesizer in the market. You ask around a producer friend, no one's seriously using it for producing the vocal. I mean, there is some way, like if you make dance music, you can sample and chop it and perhaps using some creative way, but nothing like replacing a lead singer or even user demoing. So meanwhile, in Japan, like I talked earlier, there's a Vocaloid. There's a whole subculture based on Vocaloid where the naturalness of the voice is really focused, but rather it's just something you can associate with. It's like creating a virtual singer identity that you can associate yourself with. So you market really hard on that particular identity. You could have a character design, like a Japanese animation character. And the voice bank itself, or the sample library itself, is really just an add-on. It's like a collection item with values associated to that character. So people would just buy it as a collection. They probably wouldn't even use it. But I mean, that's one practical way you can sell it back then, right? If you don't have the super good quality.
So you basically said there's an existing niche market of fans in this area, and the way that I'm going to sell it is I'm going to create characters that they would like to collect.
Pretty much. I mean, in the Western world, it's pretty niche, but in Japan, it's huge.
Yeah, and again, that's I don't know the Eastern market so well, but that's one of the things I hear all the time, like having this let's call it community engagement around things you can immerse yourself in, like universes, personas, that kind of stuff is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So you basically tapped into that way of thinking in order to start selling a product.
Yeah, so that's why, I flew to Japan, started a company here.
Okay, so you flew to Japan to start. Did you have any relationship to Japan before, or you just said, okay, this is the best place to do it?
Japan is a common destination for international students. I mean, it's in the middle of the Pacific, right? So I did flew there a couple of times during vacations, during school breaks. So there was a musician hackathon taking place in 2016 or 2017, I think. I joined that, without too much purpose, just one of my friends tagged me into it. And then from there, I learned there's a whole community doing interesting things like this. So I always had in mind maybe one day I could sell my products here.
But how did you finance that journey until then? Did you have like a regular job or?
No. I was a college student. What were you expecting?
No. Okay, cool. That's amazing. Okay, wow. Okay, so So how did you take it from this, niche market, selling to these to have where you are now, for example? Like there's a few steps between then and now. Like what was the journey in between there?
You have to start somewhere. I mean, as a business, you have to sell. I mean, if you go down the bootstrapping road, you have to sell first. So no matter what market you're in, start niche is okay. The first thing is you really have to start a character business. But I'm not the kind of person to really delve into the animation stuff. I watch a lot, but if you ask me to create my own, I couldn't do it. So you have to find partners. You have to find a company that actually does the character itself and has the interest in pairing it with a voice. And they also have to, because physical distribution in Japan is so huge, you have to be able to print all the boxes, stuff them with CDs, and burn all data into it,
And that's how you went about it?
Yeah. So we were looking for partners in Asia first, Japan, China. And fortunately enough, there were a few companies that started with that from the very beginning. They made their own characters. I think we made like 5, 10 of these to actually get it, picking up speed and being able to support ourselves organically.
And how specifically did that work? So I'm just trying to understand. There's these companies that would like to sell voices of characters. What were users using this for?
From the customer perspective?
Yeah.
First, collect it. And the second, it's like having an AI companion, but it's not really AI. It's able to sing anything you want it to sing. So you could have your own silly idea, maybe it's an original, maybe you just want to see like your favorite song being covered by your favorite character.
But there was people who had like DAWs, like, there were music producers that would be using these products.
Actually, about half of them. Another half of them are just complete beginners. They don't even think of, in terms of going pro in making music, but more like it's just an additional way to interact with their favorite character.
Amazing. Okay.
So,
Wow.
so it's totally, I guess, unthinkable to a lot of like our users nowadays.
And so who are your users nowadays?
I mean, the animation thing in Japan is still huge, but I think we have a lot more music producers who actually use our software for practically, making a track, making a lead or the harmonies or, creating demos, showcasing it to their customers.
Because I think that's the interesting thing, and we can sort of dive a bit into it. Like I do a lot of, I call it research, but technically it's not research. I just play around with a lot of different tools all the time, and I'm always tagging along on the newest stuff. Every single week, every single release, I check them out. And my conclusions are that there's basically there's 3 directions that right now is there. There's one that is, traditional music production, like most people would know. Then there's this fully autonomous, where the intervention of human is extremely limited, but of course you can steer prompts as much if you're good at it, so you can get the output that you want. But then there's this intersection where people are still inherently creative, where they want to have customizable ways of saying what they want to say, but they want to use tools that can make it faster, more convenient, less expensive. And that's sort of where I would place you guys, which is a very timely thing to do. I said this at the start of the episode. So I can imagine the users that you have would be creators that for some reason doesn't necessarily have access to a singer, or that they sit in areas where they would love to not pay for a singer to come in and do things. They can create a lot of the creative stuff themselves and also have a better income associated with what they do. Is that correct? That's like these semi-professionals and professionals?
To some point, but I like to make a distinction that in fact, including how it's being used, it's not designed to just replace a singer, or it's not completely being used to replace someone. We tend to think of ourselves as a music instrument.
Yeah, and I agree. That's a really good sentiment, because it's an instrument that you can call it a demo, you can call it an outline, you can call it supportive elements. Let's say there's a great singer, but you want to do, I've seen sort of YouTube with your products, like doing like a gospel choir in the background, like things that would be, either one, really, really hard to do, like in a fake scenario, like having a singers do a lot of different vowel sounds, or just not possible financially. But here you have this supplementing element where you can actually create this environment that sounds real, that can support the creative vision by using tools like yours. So what's your take on this whole thing with, AI generated music versus traditional music production? Where do you see the future is moving?
Again, from our point, we're really a music instrument maker. So it's like asking, when everyone's using AI for making music, do you fear that one day we'll not being able to sell like a single guitar, or will the advent of drum machine completely eradicate drums? Which is kind of ridiculous because people still want to play music. They still want to enjoy, the process of making music. And I think that's where the value of our software lies in.
I think that's so refreshing and also a bit provocative, saying that you're creating a musical instrument, because in reality it's a vocal cord where you can use the tongue and mouth to articulate certain sounds that means words. What's been the reaction from the industry, like the traditional music industry in this? Like, have they been supportive, concerned? Like, what's been the reaction?
I think the general sentiment is actually very positive. We even have users that didn't think of us as an AI. So it was a really interesting discussion with one of our users. We asked, what do you think, Synthesizer really is? And they say it's not AI. It's not doing anything, I'm supposed to do. I guess part of it lies in all the controls the user have in their hand. If you use like a text-to-sound generator, it has a certain style attached to it. It sounds like kind of generic, or it sounds really like someone, but sometimes you can pinpoint who that artist is. Sometimes it just feels really representative of a certain genre. But in our case, the resulting sound, like the style it has, really depends on who's using it.
Yeah. It's just very interesting to have that perspective, and I really haven't thought about it that way before. But in reality, that's what it is. It's an instrument that people can use. But what do you think is going to be the future of consumers in this space? Are they just going to go towards these kind of tools where things go faster and more convenient?
It really depends on what you want to do. I mean, sadly true is that a lot of, probably a huge percentage of the music we're hearing these days, probably it's a growing percentage, are, being mined for really just the economical value of it. Like the background music, you could go to Starbucks, you could hear some background music. These kind of things, these are really just data driven. You can just generate a lot of them, and I think there's no doubt people are just going to use a sound generator for that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean, everyone's going to listen to it. You don't want to actively listen to this kind of music.
What I think is really interesting, and one of the things that I think a lot about, is sort of the value of music in general. If you come from music industry and you would understand like the concept of market size in music industry, you would also very quickly recognize that it's sort of undervalued when it comes to like the impact it actually has on a societal even economical level. There's a lot of research that goes into, so what's the actual impact financially from music in the surrounding industries and workplaces, and it's quite enormous, but the size of the music industry itself is quite small. I'm really intrigued about sort of the character thing, like your first sales approach, like building into that niche, because one of the really interesting things with music right now is how we can, it's not a great word, but like democratize the way that people approach music, building music. We have this professor that was on a podcast called Dan Rowland, who's also head of strategy for Lander. And he said, which I really like, that he loves to play basketball, but he doesn't have an ambition of becoming a professional basketball player. And the way that AI is enabling people to use and interact and create music in a different way doesn't necessarily take anything away from the professionals who do this full time. So what you're saying indirectly, which I love, is when you started selling, you found this indirect monetization channel that is something completely to do with music, but was a consumer group that wouldn't interact with music in the traditional way that Marcus does now. Do you see more of that happening in the future?
It is already happening. This exactly what many of you are pointing out. Like you said, there's a I think building upon your idea, there is always the value of the music to the listener versus the value of music to the creator. And it might be true that on the listener side it's a bit depreciating, but on the creator side, there's always people who I think most people are still just enjoying the process of creating music. And they want to put their own personality into it.
Yeah.
Whether that process involves a human singer or not.
Yeah. So what's the future of your product? Are you going to like open up for people doing their own models of their own voices, or like what's the future there?
I think there are certain demands. So we actually have paired with a different product, right? So we're like in terms of product design, we're expanding the family. Like, so there's a synthesizer V for generative vocals, and then there's another one called Vocal Flex for transforming vocals. So there's a possibility, of building a whole pipeline of these tools to really accelerate, and I think not just accelerate, but also improving, like making it possible to make new kind of vocals. Maybe not just vocals, but all kind of sounds we can make.
I'm trying to get a bit back, but there's one thought I have while you're talking, which I think was really interesting, is you said in 2017, or, when you started this, that it was basically just sampling. You're cutting up words, and now you're AI-enabled or AI company. But what I think is really interesting is that the concept really hasn't changed, just the technology that gets you to, I can assume, quality faster. Like, what was the transition for you guys? Like, when did you see, okay, we could use certain technology to make this better? What was the experience of that transition of 2017 to now 7 years later?
That important transition actually was pointed out by our users. At first, it's just an experiment. We decided to maybe, we've been doing it with characters until that point, but maybe we release one without a character and see how people's going to react to it. So it was still the standard way of making voices, but we just decided not to use a character with it, but rather, where we have the display, like a little thumbnail for a character, we're putting 2 alphabets. And it took some time to pick up, but we're actually indeed seeing, professional musicians using that product to make their own demos. That was huge confirmation, saying that the technology is getting mature for outside of, our animation business.
And where did AI come into the picture there? Is that in creating that non-animated figure?
Yes, that was also around the time the AI technology became mature enough to be used. Basically, if you look at the progress of technology for AI, there's one thing that specifically the speech scientists are worried about. That is, before like 2016 or so, there was a problem called like over-smoothing problem. What you do is when you train an AI model to generate a voice, like given music score, given the lyrics, people solving this test until that point was trying to frame it as an optimization problem. So they're trying to teach the model to generate the best answer to a certain music score. The problem is there's not just one answer. There's like a million ways to sing the same score. So if you're trying to teach it explicitly using that method, it ends up learning like the average of all the answers it could have. So it's going to sound blurred, which is called over-smoothing problem.
Yeah.
But after that period, there was a transition. Someone found a method actually to be able to model like all different kind of variations given the same input. And that's, I think, the point when the technology really got mature enough to be used, to recreate that kind of randomness or dynamics within like what humans can do.
When you say found a technology, is that, I'm just trying to understand because I don't fully understand. Is it the same way you would say that some mathematician found like a equation and that something changes how people calculate stuff? Is that the same thing that happened?
Similar, but mathematicians are always like 50 or 100 years, ahead of us. By the time engineers find a solution, they're probably already dead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But okay, so that's what happened. Someone found a way to train a model or work with models, so it basically had a different way of looking at how to get quality output. And what happened? Like, you read a white paper or you saw a technology. What was the sort of the moment where you say, okay, this is something I want to pursue? Like, how did you discover this method?
It was a gradual discovery. It was, I think, the started was in maybe 2015 or so. Google released what we call the WaveNet. Like the first text-to-speech model is able to synthesize crystal clear speech. And then people just follow and they take it apart and see what is part and actually make it work, and then they make their own variations. But I think in the very beginning it runs super slow. It takes like 3 hours to generate 1 second. But then there was a lot of work while we make it faster.
Yeah. But what was your revelation? Was that like in 2019, 2020, have you run for 3 years and then you say, okay, this is the same method we can use?
It took a lot of iterations, and not just iterating technology itself, but you have to build a whole infrastructure to make it work. Now, another very important part of thinking is, a lot of these like AI sound generator or whatsoever, they run on cloud. It's not something you can just download and run on your own machine. This is hard because first, you don't have the infrastructure to run the large models fast enough. By infrastructure, I mean like all the codes. You have to write code in a very specific way to make things fast. And in many cases, it's just not enough like the building blocks for the engineer to implement them. People always think in building something on the server nowadays. The other is how do you control how to protect the intellectual property of your own models.
So how do you do that?
So to get that point, we have to basically reinvent all the wheels. That process alone took me like 3 or 4 years. That's before even releasing our product.
It's amazing, and I think the really interesting about this space is there's no really quick way to just get a solution for this. Like proprietary technology or things you build from the ground up takes so much time. And I try to say to founders, this is my opinion, I might be wrong, but I think I'm right, is there's two ways of building AI companies right now, I believe. There's the proprietary way, where you build something yourself, and there's also 2 directions there. There's one, you should have started a long time ago, and you just spent a lot of time building it, or you do something that has a very strong B2C focus, and you get a shit ton of money to do it. But like that's the 2 ways. Well, the other one is utilizing existing technology through, wrapping things or APIs or whatever to create very impactful niche use cases. So that's really 3, like 1 to the one side, 2 to the one side that's proprietary, and 1 that's basically niche use cases. So you basically belong to the school of what I believe is the proprietary technology that's just take a long time to develop. But of course, scale also matters. So did you get investors at one point? Like, what was that point?
I think there's one thing special about doing audio. Probably true to some point to other field, but I think audio is a prime example of this. That it's niche enough, but it's not too niche, right? It's niche enough that you wouldn't imagine like Google or like OpenAI nowadays are gonna announce like someday just randomly, hey, we're building a synthesizer with paired with powerful interface, But at the other point, it's not like you can really scale it up like by adding just a whole team of AI engineers. It's a very niche field to get something working decently. 20/80 rules do apply here because 20% effort copy someone else's model gets you 80% good. But really, what the pro musicians even maybe not pros even, they really care about the last 20% or 5%. And to get that level quality, you need a lot of time to build up knowledge, to build up understanding of the speech production process.
So do you guys have a team? Like, how does your company look now?
We do have a team, although for the first few years, really just one-man business. I had the time to really dig into all these tiny details, learn them myself the hard way, and make a lot of mistakes. So if you do it again, from today, I would say it's going to be really hard.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. What's really interesting is there's 2 aspects to this. I believe a founder should have a passion for what they're building beyond the financial return. And I see a lot of founders doing this mistake where they get caught up in the potential. And I think that has its merit to some degree. But I think the reality of a founder's journey, I've been a founder for 12 years, and there's many things I've failed with, and where I just fell flat in my face. But I'm still doing it, of course, because I love being an entrepreneur, and it's nice to build something of value. But really, it's because it's the passion for building, like it's the creativity, and that's what I see with you. But what I think is particularly interesting is it's your love for engineering, it seems. And one of the things that I try to comment very heavily about the music industry is there needs to be opportunity for people that does not love music in its own insulated, maybe not so fortunate way, to create value in an industry as well. And oftentimes the industry is a bit gatekept from outsiders because we have our way of doing it. This is our rules, this is our frameworks, and this is our network. But it's not really a good thing because it's not a strong industry per se. So having people like you where their passion lays in engineering and still providing value to the industry is quite important. But how have you experienced the music industry? Has it been okay to work with, or you've just been doing your own thing so you haven't noticed? What's been your journey there?
We're gradually building up, right? So in the beginning, I know nothing about music industry. I was just interested in solving my own problems. So you see, this is the thing. Most engineers, they just went nose down to solving their own problem. They don't mind how people's going to use it. That's not the right mindset, but it took me some time to actually figure it out myself. So at one point, you realize when you actually want to build a product for people to use it, you have to understand what they're using it for. So in other words, try to teach myself some music. So I actually got an intern at really just a recording shop, my local recording shop. Stayed with them for 1 month, and that's what they do. Try to go to some of their sessions. Do all the recording gears. They use Pro Tools. Lisper also I learned Pro Tools. And work with all the Mac amps and all those gears. And very important with the people, talk to the people, hear their struggle. It took some time to build up.
All right. Because I can imagine that the creative field and the engineering field, even though it's both about creating a lot of times, I think the personalities can be quite different. So for you transitioning from being engineer, just really interested in solving your own problem, to being aware of how to solve others must have been a personal challenge as well. That's getting outside of what you know and what you come from. Has that been conflicting for you?
I will put all of it under engineering framework. I'm not just engineering a technology, I'm engineering a company.
Yeah, okay.
It's still about solving problems, right? But now it's trending to all-out warfare, where you have to consider, not just engineering how your technology will solve your own problem, but also how the company will work together to solve your customer's problem. And then you apply your engineering way, you make assumptions, you test your assumptions, you test it with the different ways, and figure out which is the way that works the best, and then go back and validate your assumptions.
Amazing. So you didn't necessarily try to, fully deep dive into their culture and the way of thinking. You just try to understand it enough to have an engineering approach to solving their problems.
Understanding their culture is definitely important, but it's important under the framework of engineering the whole business up. If you want to solve one way, chain of thought, linking to the solution is you have to understand where you're at. You have to understand it so well, so you can base all your assumptions on, or you risk making assumptions out of nothing, which is very likely to be the path of failure.
From a business potential standpoint of your business, Dreamtonics, where do you see this going? Do you see that you guys would be acquired for your technology someday? Are you building towards the step getting a big customer base? What's the long-term journey that you foresee?
You asked this thing, and I don't really know what the thing is. I just find it fun to work with. I really love what I'm doing. I love making the software, making a software that people's going to use and making it helpful, making it useful to all people. I enjoy the process, so not really considering selling it anything, but I'm definitely gonna grow it.
Definitely gonna grow it. And how does your team operate right now? Like you as a CEO, I would assume you still do a lot of engineering. Like, do you have guys helping you run the company? Like, do you have more engineers? What's your setup right now?
Yeah. So it goes back to many years ago when I was still, doing as a hobbies project. I did have a few connections online, just really close friends making a program together. And later when I decided to start a company, I reached back to them, that's how I built my engineering team.
Mm. So is that how your team is right now? It's a lot of engineers, or there's also operations, or try to sort of paint that for me.
We have engineers with the sales, and the really important thing is work in different countries. So starting in Japan, now going back to China and then the Western market. So there are separate teams working different things.
And how do you navigate being a CEO? Like, it's different than just, building something alone for years.
It's it's one of the things you realize you have to do because you want to overall make things to work. You want to overall sell more products. And then in my engineering mindset, what is the problem that's blocking it? And we don't have enough people. What you do if you're gonna hire a lot of people? Someone has to do the management. So it's a very logical result if you think of this way. You need someone to manage the business. I guess the question is whether it be me or someone else.
But as of right now, it's you. And being personal on my own side, so I also run a company, and in our portfolio we have around 20-ish people, and then directly we 6 employees in like the main company that I run. I think for me that's the most difficult thing to do. Like I would define myself as a very weird mixture between an artist and an engineer. I'm an audio engineer by trade, but I'm also extremely artistic. And one of the things that I find a lot of issue with is I get so hyper focused on the job, like the product, the exploration, that for me to navigate the human complexity on top of that is just very overwhelming. How do you navigate that? Is that because you hired the right people with a culture that aligns with yours, or like what was your approach?
I have to admit that it's hard. It's hard because for me, it's just too easy, to spend too much time on the engineering side. You always want to push it to the extreme, focus too much on product, and also you know your product too well. But I think a lot of it goes to really just talk to different people, hear their thoughts, figure out the struggle, and really the motivation behind the struggle.
Hey. And how do you sell the vision internally? Is that by engineering something amazing? Like, is it we'll do something great for creativity? Like, what's your internal talk when you talk about your product?
I think the first thing is everyone in business, they're like users themselves to some point. So they're really interested in the product itself. That's really the most important thing that keeps everyone aligned. They're just really interested in this. Maybe they don't come from necessarily a music perspective. They could be more engineer, they could be more sales. But everyone agrees it's a very interesting product. And they love it.
So where do you see this from a more macro environment? So zooming out from your company and from the music industry in general, like a company like yours that in traditional ways are not a music company. You're a company that builds a product that's can be used in the music industry or the people in it. But what does this mean for the music scene in general? Do you believe that technology companies are going to have a lot of impact on the products here? Do we see that the music industry is becoming less insulated? I know it's a big question. I don't know if you can answer it, but like, how do you see this developing from a more macro environment?
I don't think it's going to change too much, really. Technology has always been a pushing factor for music media. I don't think I need to explain it, but really, going from analog to digital and if you talk about distribution, all the way to streaming. for us, software company is not too different maybe from plugin company. But if you're trying to be the best software company here, then I guess the most we can do, or what we should do, is to change people's workflow. Is to invent a new workflow that's actually useful. I mean, for people to make songs. I mean, specifically songs with vocals. So someday, your first choice into making a song is you want to first at least create a demo, using a voice synthesizer. And from there on, you can, decide whether you want to keep that synthesizer or you want to hire a real singer. But I think at some point, they're just going to default into, maybe I'll just spend 5 minutes to see how this replica sound like in a synthesizer. And then I'll decide from there on.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. And I think the fear in the music industry has for some time been like the job displacement and everything's going to change. But what I also see more and more is what you say. Sure, technology is going to disrupt things. It always has. And especially it's going to move away around jobs. But also seeing more and more that a lot of these companies that supposedly is the threat of the music industry seem supplementing to some degree now. And companies like yourself that comes very much from the outside looking in, is just like, well, this is a tool we wouldn't be able to make ourselves. Like we didn't have, as an industry, the persons enough technical focus to provide this ourselves. And we might have had an idea of what we needed, but we weren't the people to solve it. And that's probably what history has done over and over again. But I think it's easy to forget it. And also, like, my generation under, like, I'm 31. Like, we haven't been a part of this huge digitalization that changed everything. Like, for me, from when I started music in 2010 or something like that, where I really went into it, it really hasn't changed much from 2010 to 2023. Like, it's pretty much been the same. The only difference is plugins have become a bit better and computers become more strong. That's about it. So now is the first time with youngish people where we see this fundamental change. So we get really worried and confused. But I think you really hit the nail on the head. Like, this has happened before. It's just history repeating itself. But yeah, it's different. But still, it's not really different.
And also, if you think about, you mentioned something like coming from the outsider business, right? It's not always like, you're from a more advanced culture or anything, but it's not like in the pre-colonial world where all of war is about a stronger, culture. It dominates over other culture. But in this case, more like we begin as an outsider in the music business, but then in order to improve a product, we learn a hell of a lot into what producers do, what they like, what they don't like, what's their problem. And in that process, we got assimilated into part of it. So I think one of our core ethics is you have to understand the culture first and be part of the culture.
And I think that's what you're doing with the podcast now. And thank you for opening up and telling about your journey. I'm really interested to sort of follow you. Like, I follow this space a lot, and there's very few companies in your space that actually does well. But I think it also speaks to the complexity of it. I think also people get used to things like releasing all the time, like because of these big mega pushes of B2C propositions. But in reality, what's happening in the background are these companies that's been working for 7-10 years, where suddenly maybe computing has become cheaper, new technologies have become more accessible, new concepts have been released in white papers and research, whatever, that makes these companies been bootstrapping or really working for many years can now work faster. And I think there's a misunderstanding of where the innovation lies. It's not this recent thing that just happened. Like, most of the companies, and I know a lot of companies in space that does well, has been there for a long time, long before the hype was there. And I think that's the interesting dynamic to see. And, if I would make let's call it a more negative comment to a lot of startups out there, is that there's this illusion that this goes fast. Like, I just have this idea, I just find some random AI engineer and I'm going to build this shit. Like, no, that's probably not what's going to happen. And I think your story speaks to that as well. Like, anything good where you do something completely new, it's going to take time and effort. And you never really know. Like, you could also have been unlucky. Like, this whole AI movement would not have happened, and you would still be struggling with, you know, a technology where it would be much more difficult. So there's some timing element to it as well. But of course, your opportunity only came because you had done the hard work before that. So
I think I'm real lucky if you look, retrospectively. I did the right thing at the right time, and I was really lucky to be in the right market, and lucky enough to realize I'm not just building something just for myself.
that is luck, and I think of course, you know, luck is a weird word, but that's for any entrepreneur. Like the resilience of time over time is just incredibly important. Like I'm right now, Amplitude Ventures, we're building multiple products where I'm fully convinced with my industry knowledge, my network, with who I talk with, that some of the things we're building is going to be great, but the timing is not here. And I think it's going to come soon. I hope so, but I know I'm ahead of my time in my vision. So our job is just keep on building, keep on finances as much as we can, keep on bootstrapping, and then when the opportunity comes, I know we'll be ready. But that's also a weird way of building it, because that's the thing about technology. It's just like, you gotta take a bet. Like this, you know, product market fit, the traditional thing, like sure, it has validity, but not necessarily right away.
I guess as you said, one of the things you can do is really just try to amplify that little bit of chance by doing it long enough until it works. But I guess another part of the story is you have to be really good at sales and pivot it to the right audience to be able to sell it.
Yeah. And that's key. And that's where I applaud you, because as an engineer obsessed by the product, being able to do that and recognize that's not easy. This has been a great talk. I really appreciate your thoughts. I think it was a very fresh air into what sometimes in this podcast becomes a very much singular perspective from the music industry. So I really appreciate this. What could you give of advice for founders in this space right now? And I'm asking you because I wouldn't claim you've seen the future, because very few people do that, but you were willing to take a chance on something that was very unclear. If you were to talk to founders about this space right now, what's going to be your advice? What should they focus on? How should they think?
I think the hardest thing is realize your own bias. Is to, understand what you're doing from a complete outsider point of view. But if you become too involved in it, you really just you become blind. Yeah, you lost other directions. And that is a very dangerous thing to founders.
Good. I think that's very true. And I often become myself.
It happens gradually when you're working alone or you have a team that everyone's saying the same thing. Everyone is saying, oh, this is the bad thing we can do.
Good. Kanru, it's been great to have you on the podcast. Thank you for taking your time. There are 2 different time zones, but we could make it work. Kanru, good luck with your company, and I'm looking very much forward to follow it for many years to come.
Thanks so much.